Hey guys, today's January 23rd, and I want to talk about the patch notes. Here's the thing about this patch notes is that these patch notes are long, and I'm going to give you guys a warning because this video is probably going to end up longer than the rest, and I will be talking kind of fast through parts of this. This is the largest balance patch we have seen for over a year. And probably over 2 years, honestly. This is a huge balance patch change. Their primary goal, I will tell you before we even get into this, is taking underutilized heroes and giving them large buffs, while taking heroes that have single builds that have been used for a long time and trying to buff underutilized talents. So we're seeing a large buff to underutilized talents and heroes. Let's get into it. So again, this is the list of heroes that are being changed. It is a long list, so bear with me as we go through this. I'm going to explain any of the talents, and if there's ones that get a little crazy, heroes that have a lot of talents, we're going to be pulling up Heroes Hearth and covering all of the changes. On to Gul'dan. Gul'dan is seeing a Curse of Exhaustion change. Let's go into Gul'dan really quick, and I will show you the changes that we will be seeing onto Gul'dan. So, Curse of Exhaustion was a level 7 talent that says Drain Life deals more damage and slows the target's movement speed if they are affected by corruption. So, it required them to get hit by not only your Drain Life, but also your corruption, and the movement speed nerf is being increased, or movement speed reduction is being increased. Then we have Harvest Life, which increases the healing you get from your W, followed by Dark Bargain, which increases your health bonus, or your bonus health, but then increases your death timer. So, pretty good buffs to underutilized talents. Illidan's Metamorphosis has been increased in terms of the amount of health you get per hero hit. Then Fiery Brand has gotten a damage bonus increase. This was a talent I already like to pick up sometimes, but it is one that is getting buffed. Jaina is seeing some flat damage reduction, and they are buffing some underutilized talents like Ice Flows, which reduce the cooldown and increase the radius of your E. Ice Fury Wand, which made it to where every auto attack to a chilled target would do bonus damage and reduce the cooldown of your W, which is your Blizzard. I didn't like this talent because sitting and auto attacking with Jaina is really risky because of her low auto attack range. I would like this talent to go back to its old state, but instead increase your auto attack range by 1. Northern Exposure is getting a nerf. It was a pretty solid talent that made Jaina just blow people up left and right. It's still very powerful, and her ability to do that won't be affected very much. Junkrat, we're seeing a buff to Rocket Ride, which was an underpicked ultimate ability, a nerf to his level 20 because of the buff, which ends up not actually being a nerf, and then they buff the level 20 just to compensate for that, followed by another buff to Boom Pow. Kerrigan is seeing a buff to the Assimilation Mastery, makes it to where she can get more shield. And the Psionic Barrier, which was an E talent that gave you spell armor when your E did the explosion. And when your E does the explosion, you get the spell armor. That spell armor is increased. We have Li Ming's Ether Walker, which essentially means that if she doesn't take damage for a while, you can cast E on a shorter cooldown as well as a reduced mana cost, making it to where your mobility is much higher. And while this was the meta pick, people figured out that it was about mount speed, which allowed Li Ming to move around battlefields as if she was at mount speed without actually needing to mount. Meaning on smaller maps like Tomb of the Spider Queen, where the time it takes to mount and run from top to mid is about the same time it takes to not mount and to walk from top to mid. So people like Rhaegar and Li Ming could kind of traverse the battlefield faster than everyone else. With the damage taken requirement being reduced, I don't think that's enough to make this a meta talent when there are very good talents at level 1. However, I do think that this is an interesting option. Diamond Skin, the shield amount is being increased. This was great against things like tracers that would dive onto you. Maiev is seeing overall buffs, which I disagree with because in the high levels of play, she was pretty dominant. But this will make her more played in the low levels of play, so that will be pretty interesting. Pin Down's first reward damage bonus is being increased. That is her Q quest. that you normally see people pick up when they are going into the Q build. The Bonds of Corruption, the W armor reduction, is getting a buff, which was normally picked up in the W build, and Shadow Armor, which was only picked up in a very underutilized build, its duration is being increased, which essentially gave you armor when you use your E. I would imagine people in the Q build will start using this over the Q talent, though, as it's pretty much just free armor, and you don't need to land your Qs. Mephisto is seeing buffs in terms of mana cost reductions. While Mephisto's one upside was that he dominated in team fights, longer team fights, he tended to run out of mana in those longer team fights. He struggles with wave clear and with camp clear, and what I like about this is instead of them buffing him to answer all the things that he's bad at, they simply just buff the one thing they wanted him to be good at, which was team fighting, and I think they did a great job at that. Nova's seeing some buffs, mainly on a variety of talents. She's getting a stealth requirement reduction from 5 to 4 seconds. Rapid projection makes it to where she can use, rapid projection makes it to where she can use her E more often and with a lower mana cost. And stability makes it to where E lasts longer, which kind of throws people off sometimes because they're like, wait, is that the real one? Oh, it's not gone. It must have been the real one. They damage it, realize it wasn't the real one. Explosive rounds damage bonus is being increased by 10%, which is pretty decent. Overall, decent changes to Nova. Won't make her meta, but might make her a little bit better. If you see her on your team, you're going to be a little bit less annoyed that she's there. Ragnaros is seeing a pretty hefty buff to Shifting Meteor. So if you guys don't know what Shifting Meteor is essentially his Meatball quest or his Meteor quest at level 1. And essentially what Shifting Meteor does is it makes it to where each person you hit will take... So each time an enemy hero is hit by a living meteor, they take additional 3% damage from the next hits of the meteor. And then there's a quest that after hitting a certain amount of people that you can increase the duration and everything. So with it going from 3% damage on each of the hit to 5%, you can normally hit people about 6 to 10 times with a meteor, meaning that by the end of this, you could have an extra 50% damage on your meteors. This is not a bad thing. It's actually a pretty decent upgrade to that talent, which I already thought was a decent talent to pick into certain situations, particularly ARAMs. Zeratul. Zeratul's biggest problem was that he was a huge bully in the late game. He was dealt a ton of damage, was very hard to kill, but in team play, his Void Prison was still really, really powerful. So they had two options for nerfing Zeratul. Either nerf the amount of damage he does in the late game or nerf Void Prison. They went with nerfing the amount of damage he does in the late game as well as the survivability after 20. I don't know if I agree with these changes. It's going to make Zeratul a little bit less fun to play in both of his builds, but it's going to make him more team reliant. But it is a nerf that I have been asking for, or at least a variation of a nerf I've been asking for. Zeratul's been pretty dominant in Team League, and he's pretty easy to play once you get used to him, which means that it's a hero that you see a lot bullying in Team. Gazlo is a hero we don't see very often, and he's seeing pretty decent buffs to Gravo Bomb, which, I mean, it's a reduction of the cooldown and mana cost, as well as an interesting level 20 buff. The Lost Vikings is one that I actually am really interested about. So I'm actually going to talk about the level 7 and the level 13 first. So let's get into the Lost Vikings and let's talk about these talents really quick. So as we get into the Lost Vikings, the talents that are being changed are Nordic Attack Squad and Norse Force. So level 7, the Norse Force is this one right here. All Vikings gain a shield, and it increases the strength for each Viking alive. They are increasing this shield amount for all of them. So if you keep all of your Vikings alive, you get a large bonus. Level 13, Nordic Attack Squad, was a talent that made it to where you do % health damage with each of your Vikings when they attack. So the cooldown is being reduced and the amount of % health is being increased. This means that at level 7 and 13, if you pick up these talents, you could actually join in a team fight and be doing a decent amount of damage to people all of a sudden. Pretty interesting options for giving a team-oriented version of Lost Vikings a go, so when you do get to objectives, you can have some value. But I really want to talk about this level 4 talent. This level 4 talent is called It's Sabotage. So it looks like this, and it says essentially this. Eric's basic attacks against structures deal 35 damage. Well, they do damage over time, and the overtime amount was kind of in a weird method. So they've decreased this overtime amount, and they've also increased the amount of damage he does to structures. So it's actually a lot now. It's really surprising, which means that if you throw Balog and Eric in the same lane, Balog can clear the lane very quickly, and Eric can blow apart structures, making it to where if you leave these two in a lane by themselves, they're going to be one of the strongest pushers in the game with their combined forces. Meaning that you can have Olaf soaking a lane and having his ultimate ready to resummon the other two whenever you try to stop the push from the other two. Meaning that with the Lost Vikings, they're not only buffing their potential for split pushing and double soaking, but they're also possibly buffing some underutilized talents that could add to a really powerful team fight. I don't know if these changes are going to make them like tournament ready, but I do actually really like these changes and I really want to try them out. So I might be making a Lost Vikings video sometime after this. Murky's seeing some just easy buffs, honestly. Living the Dream buff as well as a spawn egg buff. You can reduce the cast times faster for spawning your egg, and Living the Dream, if you can stay alive longer, will give you more spell power. Zagara is seeing a completely changed E ability. Her Bile Drop, or not ability, but talent at level 7, used to increase your damage by 50% flat and increase your damage the more you hit the enemy heroes with a capping quest. They've changed it to where it increases the radius, which if the radius is different from area, so essentially what happens with radius is a 20% increase in radius effectively increases the area by more than 20%, but we won't really get too much into the math of that. After hitting 15 enemy heroes with infested drop, an additional roach is spawned. This makes it easier to land your E, and also you can spawn more roaches. I think this made this talent a little bit more situational. I want to talk about some of the talents that are available at level 7 that are going to be competing with this. Zagara is all the way at the bottom. And so these are her options at level 7. You have an option that makes it to where you get 2 extra charges of Baneling. This will increase your push capabilities. You have Viscous Acid, which was kind of her team fighting option where you could slow the enemies by using your Q. Finally, you have this, which increased the damage by 50%, and then each one will increase by an extra 5%. Then completing the quest increased the radius, but completing the quest is very difficult because it was a very small AoE that moved very slowly. However, with the new changes, I think that it will be situational now, where you will be picking up one of these two, I mean, most likely Viscous Acid for the slows and team fights, and you'll be picking up Bile Drop only when you have the, I would say when you're going against someone that is hiding your towers a lot, because then you can hit them and get an extra roach to tank towers further. Alexstrasza is getting some buffs to underutilized talents and just flat buffs to her W and her R, her life binder. Lowered cooldown on W and lower mana cost on her life binder. Dragon Skills is a talent that makes it to where when you use Q on someone, you would give them armor. Wait, I might be wrong on this. Give me a second. Because I believe that talent that I'm talking about is actually at level 16. So this one is when you kill someone that's CC'd, they get armor? Am I on the right path? No, you gain armor while stunned, silent, or rooted for 2 seconds. Now you'll be gaining 40 armor for 2 seconds if you get stunned, silenced, or rooted. I don't think this is going to be big enough to make it valid. Deckard's getting a lot of buffs. His win rate dropped dramatically when they nerfed how he was played in Pro, and everyone else didn't really play him like the pros did. So he pretty much went down to about a 40% win rate. And they've been constantly buffing Field Study as well as Super Healing Potion and Potion of Revival for the last few patches. But it seems like they're just furthering that as well. They're not buffing the build that was used in Pro Play. Instead, they're simply just buffing Deckard himself and all of the underutilized talents like Scroll of Identify, Field Study, Super Healing Potion, and Potion of Revival. On to Kharazim. Divine Palm got a large nerf when the support apocalypse happened quite a while back, and it's never really seen a buff. I always thought the healing was way too low, as a lot of times you could do a really good palm and then someone comes up and just dies again. So I like to see that they're trying to buff that ultimate ability. Lili's seeing a nerf onto her W and a buff onto her level 1 Eager Adventurer talent, which made it to where she had her trait, which would last longer. This gave her cooldown reduction and mana cost or mana increase during this duration, and that duration is now increased. So if you take damage, you'll have more mana and more cooldown reduction for longer, making this talent possibly better than the other ones at this point, but it will require some testing. Safety Sprint is a level 4 talent that would automatically trigger your trait while also giving you extra movement speed. So I think they're really trying to buff the trait build, which is kind of an underutilized build. Lieutenant Morales, I've been saying, is overpowered for a little while now, and not necessarily overpowered in the sense of pick this healer and you're going to just dominate, but in the current meta in the blow-up compositions, she has a particular build that pretty much hard counters it, and it relies on her W. So seeing as they are nerfing this, they are also seeing what I am seeing. Malfurion is seeing a buff to the underutilized E-talents at level 4 and a nerf to the most commonly picked level 4 talent. Now, the Treant's damage is being reduced, but his quest is actually flat damage increase, meaning that this won't affect him that much for the people who naturally get a lot of stacks on it, but for the people who rely on the Treant for the low amount of stacks, they will kind of feel a difference in this. I feel like when you have a duration bonus of your root increasing to 40%, it's kind of hard not to pick deep roots right now. Not only does that one increase the size, but it also is increasing the duration. This is actually incredibly powerful. So I have a feeling this will turn into the meta pick, while Strangling Vines will likely end up being a pick against double support. Anubarak is seeing some really cool changes. They're nerfing his basic attacks as well as his Q damage, but they are moving his Legion of Beetles talent at level 4, which made it to where you would periodically spawn beetles once every 8 seconds, and they're moving that to level 4, which was the talent that made it to where you had the bonus spell armor. The Resilient Scarabs. So they're combining Resilient Scarabs with Legion of Beetles and then giving it a slight nerf. But overall, this is a pretty good option against enemy teams that have abilities that you can block with skill shots. For example, a Li Ming, who all of her abilities are skill shots that can be blocked. So summoning extra beetles with spell armor will definitely be a plus. Artanis is seeing some decent buffs, mana cost reductions, cooldowns reductions, more armor to, again, talents that aren't really picked up as often. Blaze, Juggernaut Plating, I like this against double mages, but it's getting a buff that might make it be used against teams that don't have double mages. Chen is finally seeing some buffs. Chen is, so I want to pull up Chen over here, and I want to talk about Chen for a little bit, as I personally think that a lot of these changes are going to bring Chen back into the game, and might even see him in some competitive scene. So let's talk about this. He's getting a basic attack damage increase, which is a pretty decent thing for Chen, because he doesn't basic attack a lot, so it's just something that's kind of icing on the cake. He's getting a damage bonus increase of his Q, which is something that he uses a lot as mobility, as he uses his trait to then get his energy back and uses his Q to catch up to enemies after he uses his trait. Fortifying Brew shield amount is being reduced, which means that that's a nerf to his shield, but we'll talk about this for a little bit after we get through all the rest of the changes. So his level 1 accumulating flame, the armor bonus on quest completion is increased, meaning this talent right here, every time a hero is ignited, you increase the damage of your E, but once you hit 30 heroes, then each enemy hero ignited grants you 15 armor for 3 seconds. This is actually going to be 20 armor for 3 seconds, and this stacks, meaning that this is going to be a talent that is going to make Chen beefy and hard to kill in one of his highest damage builds. And then we have a change to his level 7 Purifying Brew, which is a trait talent. So a lot of people like to get Brewmaster's Balance, which gives you a little bit of regen as well as some movement speed. While Boulder Flavor is something that a lot of people have actually been recommending as it gives you bigger shields faster. But the new changes to Purifying Brew make this a talent that just kind of answers every counter that Chen had. So what happens is whenever you get stunned or silenced, you then reset the cooldown of your Fortifying Brew, and it makes it to where not only does it reduce the duration of that stun or silence, but it also reduces or resets the cooldown of your brew and gives you 40 spell armor. So if you jump into a team fight, you throw off your W and your E, you light everyone on fire, and then you start drinking, and they go, we need to stop them from drinking, and they throw a stun at you, well, now you have spell armor, the stun's reduced, and you instantly get your brew back, so you can start drinking again. And this cooldown is going to be on a 12-second cooldown. This talent is going to be on a 12-second cooldown, making this a very, very powerful talent for team fights against teams that are trying to counterpick you. The other talents can definitely still be picked, but I think against teams that have a lot of counters, this is going to be a really powerful talent. And then finally, level 13, Withering Flames is essentially just a talent that made it to where if you set an enemy hero on fire, it reduces their ability power. This is being increased from 25 to 30%. So you're effectively reducing enemy spell power by 30% in your E build. This is going to make his E build a little bit of a bully. I mean, you're going to be doing a lot of damage. You're going to be jumping around, reducing the enemy's damage, as well as being extraordinarily hard to kill. I think they're pretty good changes. We'll see how they turn out. On to Garrosh. Garrosh has a body check ability. Pretty much means that you do damage based off of your armor, and it will slow their movement speed, and they're increasing the minimum movement speed to 40%, and the maximum movement speed is still staying at 60%. The Blood Craze is a level 13 talent that increases the healing of your W from 10 to 15% maximum health. So instead of it being the, 20% before, now it's 25%. And then Double Up is a ability that makes it to where you double the amount of armor you currently have, and so, or your trait is currently giving you. So say you're at 30% health, you would be having something like 30 armor, 30 armor. I'm doing my math wrong. So you're at 40% health, you'd have 30 armor, and so you could press Double Up and you'd be at 60. That cooldown is being decreased. So pretty decent buff to body check and Double Up, and I know Huff is looking at this going, oh, but what if I double up and then body check someone for half their health? Yes, that's a thing. Don't do it, though. It's dumb. Imperius is seeing some interesting changes. We saw that he had a relatively lower win rate, so we are going to talk about this a little bit. His cooldown of armaments is being increased, and the mana cost is being increased. This kind of was a must-pick talent. It was very powerful. Burn the Impure now works with Valera's brand marks, the W talent, and the damage bonus. Let's go to Imperius really quick, and I will talk about the changes that he is getting. So, the talents here, we have the Burn the Impure at level 1, right? It makes it to where consuming this deals 3% of a hero's maximum health. This is being decreased to 2.5%, but works with every Valorous brand mark. So you don't really need to do the W. It's just you're doing percent health with everything that you have, right? Yeah. So that seems pretty good, seeing as you can use your E and do percent health damage, if I'm correct on that. I may be wrong. Bulwark of Flame, if that's what it actually is, Valorous Brand is his passive, right? I'm confused on this. You're doing 2.5% of someone's health every time you attack them with your E? That's every auto attack when your E's up. That's actually like kind of broken. This is kind of a must pick now for every build outside of the Q burst build. Bulwark of Flame, physical armor is being increased from 60 to 70, which was the armor that you got from landing W's on the enemies. Flash of Anger is your Q. The damage has been increased. The Flash of Anger was the talent that I misread the first time. It means essentially if you hit him with your W and then you hit him with your Q, both targets hit by the Q do AoE damage to all enemies around them, or however many targets you hit with your combo. It's a pretty good burst talent, but it's very all-in, and it works really well with the Q. The level 13 Heat of Battle, the healing bonus has been increased. They're trying to buff the talents to get people to stop picking the cooldown reduction one. But ultimately, with this change to the Burn the Impure, I feel like this is going to be even more of a must pick. Level 20, Valorous Pursuit. The cooldown reduction, the cooldown has been reduced to 12 seconds, and now it provides armor. This is a pretty good option. It was a talent that allowed you to kind of be a little bit more sticky to targets, allowed you to kind of jump to people after you got a little bit away from it, as long as you have a brand left on them. This could be a really cool talent to deal with enemies that have a lot of mobility. And with the nerf to the angelic armaments, it may be picked up a little bit more so than just upgrading your armament. On to Joanna. The Falling Sword is getting a damage increase. The cooldown is being reduced and the mana cost is being reduced. I didn't really like this talent because it was slow. If you pulled someone in and you slowed them and your team was ready to follow up, you could immediately ult them with your shield and it leads to a kill. Falling Sword is very slow. Seeing that they're buffing it is something that they definitely needed to do, but we'll kind of move past that. Reinforcements was an underutilized talent that gave her armor, and the max stacks is being increased. Hold Your Ground, the shield bonus is, oh, that is a large increase. That's going to make it pretty much a talent that nobody tries to destroy that shield. Eternal Retaliation refunds mana on your W, but it was still never really enough to make it worth the pick over some of the other wave clear options. Now the mana cost is the refunding is going from 2.5 to 3. That hits 10 people, if I am correct on that. I'm not even going to look it up, which means it's going to be a 30 mana refund. Her mana cost of her W, I believe, is 50. So I'm actually going to pull this up just because I am curious about some of these things. Where is? Let's double check all of these things. So the mana cost is 50, and the talent makes it to where it hits a maximum of 10 targets. So the most you're getting back is 30. I still don't think this is the talent we'd be picking. Zealous Glare, blind duration bonus increase from 0.5 to 0.75 seconds. This is also a talent that isn't picked very much. I picked it up against Butchers and Illidan's every once in a while. It just makes it to where every time you auto-attack someone who's blinded, it increases the duration of the blind. Makes it to where you can keep the blind going for quite a long time. Leoric seeing a decent chunk of changes. Fealty Under Death made it to where he gained health and mana whenever minions died. Minions for either team's side. This is actually the talent I liked picking purely because if you were ever going to lose a lane, you could just sit near minions as they died and you'd gain all your health back. So you could play really aggressive and then just gain your health back when minions died. But seeing a buff to that's pretty cool. It was an underutilized talent. Hardened Bones, armor bonus has been increased from 20 to 40. Bonus armor duration has been decreased from 3 to 2, which is, again, just buffing underutilized talents because we're normally see the E damage reduction package from 13 and 16. So they're trying to give you a different option so you can pick different level 16 talents as well. Shroud of the Dead King, its cooldown is being reduced. Rexar, Aspect of the Hawk, the attack speed bonus duration is being increased. Pretty much just gave you attack speed when you landed your Q. That's not going to really change too much about Rexar. Stitches, Gorge, cooldown reduced from 70 to 65, and I uninstall the game. No, I mean that's good, I guess. Savor the flavors. Level 1 talent. The health regen per stack has been increased from 1 to 1.5. Makes it to where every time you land E on the enemy, you get more health regen, and it also increases the amount that your heal or your E heals. Period, which is pretty cool. The Cannibalize, level 7, healing increased from 1.75 to 2. Cannibalize made it to where you could activate your passive, and your passive would heal you based off the damage it dealt. Digestive Juices is an E talent that I don't even know what it does. But it deals 30 or 40% more damage to heroes, which that's its new or its added functionality. A lot of bug fixes that are being fixed, tooltip issues, followed by issues of projectiles, Valeris brand, Imperious's voice lines have been added, and they didn't mention it, but there was a dog that was added into this patch as well. I can't remember what his name is, but it was a clever name. And yeah, so that is the balance patch for today. Thank you all for those who took the time to read through or listen to all of these balance patches, and I think this is a really good step for the game. It's getting a lot of underutilized builds and a lot of underutilized heroes and trying to get them back into the game. So I'm excited to try out new Chen. I'm excited to try out new Vikings and see what we can do with those. Thank you all for watching, and feel free to check out any of my other videos.